Hey y'all, Fred here. Thanks so much for joining me today as we are going to take a look at this Sencut Serene knife. If y'all are anything like me, when you reach a certain stage of life at Christmas time, when the holidays roll around, everybody asks you, well, what do you want for Christmas? And I'm like, I don't know. I kind of have everything that I already want or need. And so this year I asked for some different knives, some budget knives in a variety of different budget steels, because we've just started this cut testing where I want to be able to really get a good baseline for how some of these knives cut at different steels, like 𝗕𝗂𝗴𝗵-𝗃. In this case, this is a beautiful D2 blade with a good heat treat on it. So I want some of these lower cost, affordable steels, budget steels, that are made well, that we can then use as the baseline testing to see, okay, what does a well-known, good quality D2 steel with a good heat treat, nice HRC rating, how does that compare to some of these other replica knives that we're buying that may or may not be in a D2 or an 8CR or a 9CR? So there you go. This is what we got. Sencut, if you don't already know, is part of 𝗕𝗵𝘃 and 𝗦𝗲 knives. So 𝗦𝗲 is their top tier brand, then 𝗕𝗵𝘃 is in the middle, and Sencut is just below that, although not much farther below that. I'm going to say that this knife here compares very favorably with just about anything that 𝗕𝗵𝘃 has out in their brand. So it's kind of blurring the lines between Sencut and 𝗕𝗵𝘃 when you talk about some of the quality of these knives. Before we get started, though, if you would please down below here, hit that subscribe and notification bell. That really helps little guys like us get our videos found more on the YouTubes. You know, the old YouTube doesn't like to share videos like knives and other types of weapons. So it takes a lot of effort, a lot of uphill pushing to get our channels found. So that helps. Thumbs up down there in the bottom. That always helps. Thumbs down. Give me any feedback you like. Let's take a look at the box first. Obviously, you can see this is a Sencut standard box. This is the Serene knife in D2 steel. Standard fare for what you get basically in just about everybody's box. It does have the old zipper case in here with the fur-lined stickers and cards and warranty information. Enjoying your knife. There is a little knife sticker in there. Not sure what model that is. Somebody may recognize that. Nice little microfiber cloth and the plastic that it came in. Pretty standard fare for most all knives. So that's what you can expect on that. Let's take a look at some size comps. This is what I call kind of a medium to full size knife. Got a pretty good size on it, so let's compare it. So we start with our Benchmades here. Crooked River is a knife that just dwarfs just about every other knife. You can see the Serene falls perfectly in between the Crooked River and the Bug Out, so that gives you a sense of the size. We have our Spyderco PM2 and Para 3 we're going to compare it to. Again, this one actually is just about the same size as the Para 2. So that may give you a good sense. You can see it's much larger than the Para 3 by an inch or so. So definitely a Para 2 size knife. Some little more modern comparisons here. How about the 𝗕𝗵𝘃 Vision FG and the Pyrite Light? This is the regular, not the large, obviously. And so it's a little bit longer than the 𝗕𝗵𝘃 Vision FG, and a good bit longer than the Pyrite Light. So that'll hopefully give you a sense of where this kind of falls in the overall size. I'm going to bring up the specs down the left-hand side of the screen, take a little bit closer look. This is an 8.17 full open length. Pretty good size there. You've got 3.5 inches basically measured to the farthest front point on the scales. But if you're actually measuring the length of the cutting area, it's about 3.6 inches. So it's even more cutting area than it is just length from tip to scale. Closed length, about 4.7 inches. Fits quite nicely in the hand. Blade thickness is a relatively thin and slicey 0.12. Handle thickness is a little less than half an inch at 0.46. These are aluminum scales, full flat grind, D2 steel. As I mentioned, I did look up the HRC rating is 59 to 61, which anywhere from 55 to 62 is the range for D2. So this is definitely pushing the upper end of that HRC scale. Another reason why this is going to give us a great baseline comparison in our cut test. Total weight's just under 3.5 ounces. Certainly nothing to it. Very easy to carry all day long. This is a button lock, a plunge lock. And the price right now on Amazon is $46.75. I will have a link down below. That is an affiliate link, so I might get a buck or two. Certainly, it's a great way for you to support the channel, and God knows I need it because y'all, nobody sends me knives for free. I've gotten like 1 or 2 knives over this whole past year that for review. So anyhow, all that little bit helps. I did measure behind the edge, pretty slicey, anywhere from a 16 to 17 thousandths. Again, nice full flat grind, relatively thin blade stock to start. So nice thin slicey behind the edge there. All right, let's take a little bit of a closer look here. The pocket clip is standard fare for pretty much every 𝗕𝗵𝗴𝗵 and Sencut knife ever. Although I will say that they, if they've got the cutouts on this, I don't know if that reduces the weight very much at all. It does have this pokey tip on it that I'd say almost everyone hates. It does make it nice and easy to get into the pocket. So they just use this clip everywhere on almost every knife they make. It is what it is. It's not great. It is a little bit pokey. It is fully reversible. You can see that there. It is not recessed into the scales. However, they do have flat head screws, so no problems there with it easily going all the way up into your pants pocket. Tension is good. Certainly, this could be shorter and less pokier. This is almost deep carry. I mean, you're going to get to that much on the tip of the knife, so just about almost deep carry. The hardware is T8 on the pivot screws, T8 on the body screws, which is nice, T6 on the clip screws, which is typical standard fare for most knives. They did countersink the screws into the scales, so that's a nice touch. They don't ride above. That's nice. This is a non-captured pivot. So you can see there's a T8 screw on both sides. That's where something like the old finger bit, I thought I had one handy here, but I don't see it, comes in handy, that little dealie that you can put on one side so you can unscrew from the other. The stop pin is typical fare for this knife. Standard stuff there. There's a little bit of blade shouldering. You can see there. It wraps above the top of that blade. Nothing important or meaningful. The flipper tab on this knife is, I'm going to say this is just about the most perfect flipper tab I have seen in a long time. I'm going to do another comparison to another knife I picked up from Sencut also over Christmas, and you can see the difference in this flipper tab. This has a pointy tip that makes it much less comfortable to flip unless all you're doing is the light switch. With this nice rounded tip, you can see the jimping comes all the way over the top. You can push button it, although it is possible to fail if that's your thing, is you're a push buttoner, you're just pushing that straight down. You can see sometimes that'll fail. It takes a very stiff push button in order to get it out. However, light switching it all day long, very difficult to fail that. The detent is dialed in really well on this. Obviously, you have thumb studs as well. Those are well done. Easy to front flip, easy to reverse flip all day long. No issues with that. One of the other nice touches about the thumb studs on this is that you can see they're nice and tucked in out of the way of the cutting path. Again, I'll bring in another comparison. You can see the Sencut Pulse Wave. Look how far out into kind of what is almost the cutting path, except you've got a large finger choil. So maybe that's not really the cutting path, but you can see how much farther out into the blade the thumb studs sit there as opposed to how they sit on this Serene. So that's really nice as well. Lots of really nice design touches just like that. Again, that detent is really well dialed in, especially for a button lock, because it is that button and the spring tension on that button that provides the detent. Man, it's hard to almost not feel this the same as a nice, good quality detent ball, which of course this knife doesn't have. But man, it sure feels like it. The detent is, I'm going to say, just perfectly dialed in for all 3 modes of launch. And you can also, of course, just use the button itself to launch it. It takes a little bit of practice, but can certainly work just as well. It does occasionally bounce out. I don't know if I like that right there. So, but that's a thing with all of these button locks. They just tend, you just have to really get the timing right of releasing that button at the exact right moment. On the downswing there, I released it too early, and when it bounces, I just released it too late on that. So it's just a matter of getting your timing down, and if this is your knife, you would certainly get it down. That button, while I'm mentioning it, is nicely recessed, as you can see, into the scales. It does take a good amount of force, not a difficult amount of force, but a solid amount of force. You're not going to accidentally push this button in and release that. And there's almost no way with this knife for you to even get to it. Certainly right-handed, there's just no way for any of your fingers to get anywhere near that button. But even left-handed on this knife, you can see that even your hand, even if you choke up as high as up here, there's nothing in your hand that's going to push that button. So another great little design element in terms of the way the button lock came. Minimal lock stick, just a tiny hint of it at first. It's basically all gone now after a couple hundred flips. I have spent some time enjoying this, sitting at my desk, flipping it out all day long while I do some heavy thinking there. But it's solid enough that you know you're pushing that button. It's almost like a minimal amount of haptic feedback. And actually, now that I'm saying that, sitting here, I almost feel no lock stick on this at all when I'm pushing it anymore. So again, perfectly well dialed in button lock. Standard fare 𝗬𝗵𝗵 and Sencut, they all do these excellently. You can bang that as hard as you like, and that is not going to break free. They have the button locks, the plunge locks dialed in perfectly well. All right, let's take a look at the blade. Again, this is a D2 blade. Nice drop point. You can see it slopes nicely down from the center line of the knife. That makes it certainly easier to get to on things like draw cuts. Nice big sweeping belly, full flat grind, very pokey tip. That could be a somewhat delicate tip. You're going to have to be a little cautious with that, but it does stay pretty thick almost all the way out to that tip. So it's not going to be super delicate, but definitely something you want to be careful. You don't want to be prying staples out with this, especially with a D2 blade at 59 to 61 HRC. The jimping on this is great because there's no forward finger choil. That's exactly where your thumb lands. This is how you're going to be cutting with it. And man, you feel well locked in. That flipper tab and finger choil almost acts like a slip guard to prevent your hands from sliding up between that and this really nice thumb jimping that is very effective. You are really locked into this thing. It's very nicely done. Obviously, this is riding on ceramic bearings, kind of the open face, but very smooth bearings. I mean, that is a free swinging. And here's the thing about this, where, you know, a lot of cheaper knives that we get that are on bearings, you feel those bearings rolling around. They're almost like rough. They're not really high quality bearings. These feel like really high quality bearings. I don't know that they are necessarily, but the smoothness, you don't really feel those balls rolling around like you do with a lot. So I was very impressed with that. Super smooth action. The blade came perfectly centered right out of the box. The sharpening choil. This is a barely did it kind of sharpening choil because you can see the plunge line goes all the way out to here. So you don't really have a whole lot of sharpening life. They kind of make it look like they're giving you a decent sharpening choil, but if you really look at where that blade starts to thicken up down below there, it's almost out at the tip of the blade where it exists. So you got a couple of good sharpenings in here before you'll start to develop maybe a little bit of a smile. If you're proficient with some cutting tools and some diamond files, you could certainly make that larger and no problem. Bob's your uncle. Okay. Factory sharp on this thing. This thing came really sharp. I'm gonna call this a 9 out of 10 on the redneck cutting scale. It cuts very smoothly all day long. No problems at all. No nicks, very sharp. I mean, that's a really sharp blade right out of the box. I just do have a couple more, and when we get to the pulse wave, you're going to see this one actually is even sharper than that. This is my laser beam 10 out of 10. So as sharp as this is, I'm still only giving that a 9 because I have to rate the starting sharpness on these for my cutting test purposes. But really good. You know, you can't expect much more than that. All right. Ergonomics, very good, as I mentioned. Fits great in the hand. The clip is going to be definitely a little bit pokey. We'll see that in our cutting test when we start cutting some hard stuff. It is what it is. That's what they do. No choil. You could potentially use this as a trigger with your fingertip, but you're going to have to be real careful about that. Very delicate. And you're not going to want to do that in any kind of hard use. You're just too close to the cutting edge of the blade for that. So back here, locked in, that's your grip, solid all day long. How about some negatives? Hard to find much wrong with this knife, especially at this price. Again, pocket clip's not sunk into the scales, so I guess I could ding them a half a point for that, but that's not unusual. It is reversible, and the heads are flat, so not an issue. No texture. That would be maybe the one major thing I could say about this. Although these aluminum scales look great, actually looks very much like a titanium knife. So if that's your thing, you like metal titanium looking knives, this might be right up your alley as a great budget beater knife. But it's a little slick, very well finished. There's no sharp edges anywhere. The fit and finish overall on this thing is excellent. Especially for the money, but certainly I can see if you had wet hands or were dealing in any kind of wet, slippery substances, this would potentially become a little slick in the hand. Again, you're pretty well locked in because of the ergonomics, but the slickness of that scale may be a little slippery, I guess. And that sharpening choil, as always, could definitely be better, as I mentioned earlier. So let's bring it on home. Overall impressions. This is a really nice, affordable, medium-sized knife, about a 3.5-inch long blade, full flat grind, very sharp. Nice thin behind the edge, pokey, sharp tip, but not too delicate. Certainly can handle some decent pokey type of work. Beautiful aluminum scales. Looks a little bit like a titanium knife. Potentially a little slick, as I mentioned. You've got great multiple deployment options between the button and the flipper tabs. Those all work great. The detent is really well dialed in on this thing, especially for a button lock, but even for a detent ball. If this had a detent ball, I would still tell you this is a really good, well dialed in detent. Easy deployment, very smooth on the bearings. This is great for a medium duty work knife, an all day long EDC knife just for carrying around. It's lightweight, goes easy in the pocket. You don't have to worry about beating it up because of the price. That D2 blade is going to last. It's going to hold an edge better than just about any other budget steel. I mean, D2 ranks better than 14C. I think it ranks even better than 154CM, CPM 154, better than VG10, better than Nitro V, certainly better than 9CR, 8CR. So the edge retention is going to beat just about everything. You just have to be careful about the blade. It's not as corrosion or rust resistant as those other steels are. I'm actually not going to treat this blade with any kind of coating. I want to see what does it really take. I live in a very humid environment down in the South. And so I'm going to let this thing ride and give it some good use, maybe even some wet use, to see really how well does this hold up to moisture and abuse, and how easy or not is it really to rust this thing. We're going to find that out. But again, just be aware that if you work in a very wet or humid environment, that D2 steel might not be the right choice from you. You know, that's about all I can say. This is an absolute recommending knife, especially at the price under $47 for what you're getting with the aluminum scales. Really well dialed in detent and button lock. This thing is a great knife. I will put a link down below in the description. Again, that is an affiliate link, so if you use that link, you'd be helping me out. Again, thank you so much for doing that. I really do appreciate it. It certainly helps me afford to be able to buy and test more knives for y'all. So I think that's about all. As always, if you would please down below, hit that subscribe and notification bell. Give your boy a thumbs up if you think I did okay. Throw me a thumbs down. Let me know if you'd like to see something different. Otherwise, I appreciate you so much always for tuning in, and I will see you on the next video. Take care.